Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Right now I have John Hancock in the studio with me. He is from the International University of Geneva and the World Trade Organization to have a look at what's been going on at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week. So John, first of all, can you tell me what are some of the hottest topics on discussion this week in Davos?
Well, Davos is always a snapshot of what the world is thinking about, or probably more accurately, what the world is worrying about. And there's a number of big issues. They're talking about signs of widening inequalities, especially in advanced countries. They're talking about the persistent high levels of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, particularly in Europe. But all of that's traceable back to one big question: where's the growth? We're now 5 years into the Great Recession, the Great Downturn. Financial crisis was in 2008, and the year following that, it was always possible to think that this was part of the normal business cycle, that the recovery was just around a corner. But we're now in 2013, and I guess the big question is, where's the recovery? It even has some people asking, is a recovery even possible in the current situation?
And John, looking at David Cameron's speech this week in Davos, looking at the global issues of tax avoidance, now what type of impact will this have on places like Switzerland?
That's a good question. I mean, David Cameron's speech was an interesting speech. Tax isn't exactly the sexiest subject, but I think he got people's attention. And very quickly, people accused him of hypocrisy. I think he was at the G20 meeting earlier in the week where he said to the collective heads of state, we'll roll out the red carpet in Britain for any rich Frenchman trying to flee Francois Hollande's new tax policy, which of course didn't go down very well with the French. So for him to arrive in Davos and start talking about the problems of tax avoidance and the international problems of tax collection kind of opens them up to the accusation of hypocrisy. Having said that, he's on to something. I mean, according to a British NGO, Tax Justice, a staggering $3.1 trillion, that's roughly 5% of global GDP, leaks out of the system, is not captured by national tax collection agencies, largely because technology and financial integration has outpaced the ability of authorities to grab that tax. And if you put that into context, if the United States had just 5% more in revenues, a lot of the problems they face, the fiscal cliff, for example, would start to disappear.
And John, David Cameron also this week defended his decision to seek a referendum for his country's membership for the European Union. Now, I know the Irish Taoiseach, Prime Minister Enda Kenny, doesn't like this at all, does not think it will be good for Europe. Now, David Cameron said Europe is being outcompeted, out-invested and out-innovative. If this actually goes true, what do you think will happen? How will it have an impact on Europe?
Oh, it's an interesting, in a sense, an interesting position he's put himself into. Again, there is a kind of a paradox. On the one hand, you talk about the need for much greater international cooperation on things like taxation, and on the other hand, you announce that you are going to try to renegotiate Britain's participation in the EU, presumably with the possibility that if the negotiation is not successful, you'll leave. So that looks, at best, paradoxical. The problem David Cameron faces, of course, is that at home in Britain, the EU is not popular. This is not Brussels is not an organization or a system that is well loved by your average British person. So there's an immediate political appeal in talking about renegotiation. I think what we have to keep in mind, though, is a negotiation is always two-sided. Britain might have a wish list of things it would like to change in the EU, but the moment you open the door to negotiation, the EU will have its own wish list of things it would want from Britain. I think one thing that's changed, and I think this is quite a profound change, is that Europe's tolerance for this talk of renegotiation or the threat of Britain leaving seems to have diminished. There seems to be a fatigue with this debate, especially when Europe is grappling with its own problems in the wake of the financial crisis. And at least on the continental side of the channel, people seem to be saying, well, let them go. We just don't have time to carry on this endless debate, and we certainly don't need backsliding. We want to move forward with the European project. If Britain doesn't want to be part of it, maybe it's time for them to think about going.
Thanks, John. And what type of outcome do you see at the end of this week?
Davos is always interesting. I'm not so sure that it's a leading indicator so much as a trailing indicator. Sometimes the mood in Davos is a reflection not of the future, but of what's been in the past or the recent past. So right now the mood in Davos is pessimistic, is the sense I get. A great deal of cautious pessimism about the future. That might in fact be a signal that things are going to change for the better and that we're on the cusp of an upturn overall in the economy, but we'll have to wait and see if that turns out.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for right now, but John will be back in the studio sometime soon to have a look at global growth and innovation. But for now, goodbye.